Hello and welcome to this community call on how to talk about open access to researchers and decision-making people at universities and research institutes. And it's a joint call with AfLIA, WACREN, LIBSENSE community. And I would like to ask Nkem from AfLIA to say a couple of welcome words. And I think you have to unmute yourself, Kim.
Yeah, I've done that. Good day, everyone.
Good day.
I'm Nkem Osigwe. I work for AfLIA as a training director. AfLIA is quite committed to building the community, the capacity of African librarians to drive quality education that can generate innovations for transformed communities. That's why we believe in open access, so that Africans can benefit from knowledge that already exists and then use such to create theirs too. So getting open access up and running now, some questions that we might still have about how to do things is why we are here. And I'm quite glad that we're here. Thank you very much.
Thanks a lot, Sarah. And we are ready to start, Sarah. Yeah, and if you want, you can introduce yourself in a Zoom chat. The way we planned this community call, we asked you to submit your questions, and we have 43 questions. And I asked Rosemary Otando from University of Nairobi and my colleague Romy from EIFL licensing program to help me with answering them, and we also have input from Dr. Ila from Covenant University in Nigeria. I grouped your questions, so we'll go one by one. And the first question is about article processing charges. How do you talk to faculty about article processing charges? And let me share my screen. I hope you can see it in a slideshow mode. So what I usually do when I talk about article processing charges, I always say that over 70% of journals don't charge article processing charges, so only a small fraction do. So current number is 74% of journals registered in the Directive of Open Access Journals do not charge. And I always encourage researchers to check Directive of Open Access Journals and find a journal which doesn't charge. What we also do in EIFL licensing program, that when we negotiate licensing agreements, we try to include waived or discounted article processing charges. And we're also in the process of starting negotiating so-called transformative agreements that would include publishing and access to content. And in this case, researchers wouldn't even need to pay article processing charges. And that's why I asked my colleague Romy to join me and talk a little bit more about that. So over to you, Romy, and let me stop sharing.
Yeah, so like Iryna has explained, I managed a EIFL licensing program. So historically, I've negotiated with publishers for free and discounted access to paywalled content. So anything that's not open access. So sometimes there's a bit of confusion perhaps between what is negotiated free access and what is open access. And now our agreements to try and include as well discounted or waived APCs. And a lot of publishers have their own article processing waivers and discounts that they offer. If you look on their websites, publishers like Springer and Wiley offer article processing charges waivers to some countries and discounts to other countries. if the corresponding author is based in those countries. So this is for, usually it's just for gold open access or fully open access journals. But because publishers could change those offers at any time, EIFL has been trying to negotiate agreements with publishers for discounts and waivers and APCs, and also promote these a little bit more, because we think what the publishers offered isn't very visible. So the first page you see here is one of the pages in the licensing program. I can send the links later, where we explain a little bit about what we do in terms of supporting countries and negotiating article processing charges. Then we have a page as well that you find at the top of the website, what we do, negotiated APCs, where you can search for each country and see which offers are available. So this is not for access, just the discounted APCs. So you could search for Ghana, for example, and you'll search for free, would mean waived APCs. And then you get the list of 3 different offers. So De Gruyter Journal, Sage, and Taylor and Francis. So if we look at one of those, you'll see that there's a process to complete. So usually once the article is submitted and it has been accepted, that's when the waiver would be applied. And there's detailed instructions on how it works, how to claim the waiver, the process to go through. You can all find on this page. And for each of those, we have done a dedicated webinar. So you can view the recording, and there's also some slides you can download. So for both Taylor and Francis, Sage, and De Gruyter, you will find a detailed webinar. For De Gruyter, we've not done the webinar yet, actually, because it was just announced. But the other 2 we have done. So I don't want to take up too much of your time. The other thing I want to show you briefly is this spreadsheet, which is also linked to from our website, which includes the journals that are eligible in this offer for all 3 publishers where we currently have agreements. And we hope to add more by the end of the year. And this list lists the APC list price. So if you qualify for a discount, it will tell you 20 or 30 or 50%, and then you can calculate the exact APC. It has impact factor information where available, and subject area, as well as language, for example. If there's nothing, it means it's English. So hopefully including the subject category would make it easier for researchers to find journals in their disciplines, so they can select what's relevant. And then just look at those journals and perhaps filter it further. So this is a live document, and it's open. Once you have the link, you can access it.
Thanks,
anything
Romy.
else you wanted to add?
Yeah, but perhaps you could add a link to that spreadsheet, because I put other links to the chat.
Sure.
Yeah. Thanks a lot.
You can find it through the website, but it's a little bit hidden, so it might be better to put it in the chat if I can find it.
Thanks a lot. So moving on with
I'll leave my email address in case people have any other questions about that.
Thanks a lot. So I want to bring all the questions. So next set of questions are how to convince researchers that submission of their work to repositories and open access journals is important to their reputation and visibility, how to talk about open access and publishing with faculty, how to present benefits of publishing in open access, how to convince authors about open access, what are the many ways to encourage authors to embrace publishing in open access, and how to convince faculty on the benefits of open access. And I ask Rosemary Otando to help with answering them, because she's been doing a great work at the University of Nairobi, which adopted and implemented an open access policy, and has a very well populated repository. So over to you, Rosemary.
Hi all. Thank you so much. I think I'll just go through, there's so much about open access, but I'll just go through in the questions that have just been forwarded. And one of them is just how to convince our researchers that submission of their work repository and open access journal is important for their reputation. I think this when it comes to convincing the researchers, we really need to emphasize on the benefits of open access initiatives. They have to know that open access means free, hence there's more visibility. It also means that the author will be able to showcase his research well. It also means about knowledge, managing your knowledge, attracting funding and requirements for funding, because there are some organizations, when it comes to funding, you have to show that you have published your research in open access journal or platform. So when you provide those benefits to your researchers, then they'll be able to understand and be able to embrace the open access initiatives. For example, you can come up with the strategies. You can give examples of researchers who have benefited in embracing open access initiatives. And for example, like in Kenya, we always talk about our Professor Abukuta, what she has benefited in open access initiatives. And when you discuss this with them, they'll be able to understand the real benefit of open access initiatives. Provide also repository statistics so that they can be able to show how many people view open access articles and items vis-a-vis the commercial articles. Give examples of the local researchers, also the success stories about open access initiatives, and provide examples of journals that are on high impact, that are recognized as high impact in the open access. Like for example, when it comes to Director of Open Access Journals, the Web of Science, how many journals are there that are open access? So these are the things these are the areas that you touch on to be able to convince your researchers to embrace the open access initiative, and be able to publish in open access journals. Also compare the citation. You can be able to discuss with them when you are that if you publish in open access journals, you'll be able to, your work will be cited more as compared to the commercial. And also just advocate about open access policy, because without a policy also, all these things, you may not make it when it comes to open access initiatives. So that is just generally about how to convince the researchers on open access, on how they can embrace open access initiatives. Talking about open access, publishing with members of the faculty, and I think it's just the same thing. Emphasize on benefits and how to support open access initiatives. You can use some strategies on talking about publishing to member faculties, and one of them is that you can use the committees, especially in academic institutions. The library is included in several committees, and you can use those committees, like for example, the university management board, the college departmental level. Make sure that you use these committees to be able to talk about publishing and to be able to talk about open access to the faculty members. Also through mailing lists. Usually most of the academic institutions, they have mailing lists, and you are able to reach the academic faculty, the faculty members through these mailing lists. Talk about it, put it in your website, and emphasize on those activities that you are doing on open access. Make sure that you have also workshops, in-house training for these faculty members. By the way, it's not that they really don't want to embrace open access initiatives. most of them is that they don't really understand, and they don't really understand the benefit of open access initiatives. So when you use these strategies to reach them, they'll be able to understand and embrace the concept. Identify and train members of the faculty, especially those who are keen on open access initiatives. Train them so that they are able to be champions out there. They are able to reach their other colleagues and advocate on this open access initiative. Encourage, train, and especially in self-archiving, encourage also in the training of train your faculty members on self-archiving so that they can also be they can be able to self-archive by themselves. And also make sure that your institution participate in open access events like the Open Access Week, because I know these faculty members will be able to, when they're coming to know more, to learn more about it, they'll use those events to learn more about the open access initiative. So generally, benefits of publishing of open access are just so many. You can discuss this with your faculties, talk about them, talk about increased visibility, how they can showcase their research output for prestige, how they can increase their citation impact, how they can improve access to local publications through the open access initiative, how they can enhance research sharing to enable new research to be built on the earlier findings, how they can advance their knowledge, effective communication of research results, because when it comes to open access, it is free. So communication of the results, research results is very effective. How it can reduce duplication and attract research funding. Those are the benefits that you really need to emphasize when you're talking to the academic staff. And also collaboration, because it's through this open access initiative that you are able to collaborate. Somebody will see what you have read, what you have published, and maybe even in another institution or another country, and be able to collaborate with you on that related subject. Then expanded opportunities for teaching. You know, as we mentioned, as Romy mentioned, that commercial articles, whatever, journals and all that, and publications are very expensive. But when we embrace this, we embrace the open access initiatives, the journals and all that, you'll be able to expand your opportunities for teaching and learning, and able to track your research and impact. And above all, even the plagiarism. Somebody may never plagiarize your work because it's online. And then also the open access articles are more, we have more tweets. Let them know that these open access articles and journals are more visible than the commercial ones. And also when it comes to, because most researchers feel that maybe they will lose their rights, especially the copyright. You really have to really encourage them that they will keep their rights as an author as compared to commercial publications or commercial publishing. So use the strategies of success stories to mention, to convince the members of the faculties members of faculties to embrace open access initiatives. So I think I've just mentioned a lot of, just a bit of promotion, convincing, and ensuring that the faculty are aware of what we do. Any question before I just go to the next one?
Yeah, I think you can continue.
Yeah. So I think I've talked about the benefits of publishing open access, how to convince authors, what are the many ways to encourage authors to publish in the open access outlets. I thought that was a question also. And the issue of what are the many ways to encourage authors. I think I've also mentioned that, the many ways of encouraging, you ensure that you mention and you emphasize on the benefits of open access, and make sure that you initiate advocate for open access initiatives and policies in your institution, and share, be able to share examples of open access initiatives that have been embraced without being aware that they are. You know, most people, by the way, somebody mentioned about how do I advocate for open access initiative, yet I don't have the repositories. First of all, people, I think the researchers, they in somehow, they are using open access resources without knowing that they are open access. So that is one of the first things to do. Begin with sensitizing on benefits of open access in general. And even if you don't own a repository, these researchers, they still use the resources, open access resources. So they need to be aware that whatever they are using is open access, so that they start embracing the initiative, and ensure that you have shared examples on open access resources, because open access resources, open access databases for publishing like DOAD, Simago, and other repositories, they are available free. And maybe your users are using them, but they don't know that they are using open access platforms. So let them be aware. And above all, after that, make sure that you initiate the open access initiative in your institution or in your academic in your institution. I think that's what I can say about just convincing the researchers on how to publish or how to embrace open access initiatives.
Thanks, Rosemary. Daniel has a question. How did University of Nairobi cleared the myth that open access journals are inferior compared to commercial journals? And Daniel feels proud about this, about your efforts, because in some areas it is more proud rather than knowledge sharing.
Mm-hmm. Just repeat, please.
It's in the chat. How did University of Nairobi cleared the myth that open access journals are inferior compared to commercial journals? Because in some areas it is more on proud rather than knowledge sharing.
The question is not coming out so well.
Maybe if you could open a chat.
Yeah.
Do you see it from Daniel? How did University of Nairobi cleared the myth?
Myth that open access journals, okay, are inferior. I think first of all, what we did is, especially the library was at the forefront of spearheading open access initiatives, and we ensured that we ensured that we reach the top level managers. And the first thing we did is that to make sure that the top level managers understand the benefits of open access journals and open access initiatives. And we did that through so many workshops. We did quite a number of workshops. We reached the university management board. We managed to do a lot of advocacy, both down, up, down, and down, up, so that we reach every level of the academic staff or the faculty or any staff in the university. And we also advocated for open access policy. And we were also included, we made sure that we are included in that policy formulation, so that we bring out these areas, these gray areas, these areas that are quite delicate to handle. And one of the issues that came up in the policy is that if you publish in open access journals, you can still be promoted as the same person who has published in any other commercial journal. So it's like you are at par when it comes to open access and other publications. So from there now, staff and academic staff were encouraged to publish in any journal, any platform, and more so the open access, because of what Romy even mentioned, that you can be able to then do it for free and all that. So that is the main thing that happened, the policy. It really contributed towards that. And we also offer incentives for faculty members if they publish in open access journals. They can be promoted like any other person.
Thanks a lot.
So there's a question on how to identify open access journals. Pardon?
Yeah, please go on.
There is a question also on how to identify open access journal or platforms. I think that the platforms are just, you had mentioned, I think, the platforms are just too many. You can use, you can Google through Google Scholar. You can go through directory of open access journals and get so many journals that are of open access. And I think, Iryna, there's a part that you are going to mention all these platforms that you can get that are in open access journals or platforms. When it comes to repositories, you'll go to open access repositories, you'll be able to see a lot, all the repositories. You'll be able to you'll be able to get a list of all the repositories that are open. Maybe Iryna, you can add.
No, I think you've covered that, and I'm showing a slide with directory of open access journals, which is, I think, is the best place to look for open access journals because it's quality controlled. So you only have quality peer-reviewed journals. So moving on, thanks a lot, Rosemary. And we have one more question. I'm aware about that. Whether open access means really free access. What about cost of accessing internet? But we'll come to it a little bit later because we also received this question in advance. So next question was about convincing researchers to participate in open access and open science and motivating them to share freely and even those who are seeking financial reward with their research output. And there was a very interesting book published recently during Open Access Week. It's called Contextualizing Openness, Situating Open Science. And it has a chapter about Kenya, which is called Harmonization of Open Science and Commercialization in Research Partnership in Kenya. And authors conducted a series of interviews with universities in Kenya that have open access policies and also have technology transfer offices. And what was really interesting as a result of those interviews and research is that they found out that in recent years, Kenyan universities and research institutions have seen simultaneous growth in both pro-open science policies, as well as an increased pursuit of knowledge patterns. So there is actually no contradiction between open sharing and applying for patents, because of course, if you decide to go for patents, you don't share anything. So open access policies are not in contradiction because they require openness to already published or declared research results. There were also very interesting observations in this chapter that both national policy and legal environment in Kenya is supportive of open science approaches, and government encourages increased openness and availability of publications, and also openness has been embraced at university level, with universities and research institutes adopting open access policies, setting up repositories and supporting wider dissemination of research outputs. And there was also an interesting conclusion that public universities in Kenya have been embracing open access journals as a preferred channel of publication. As Rosemary explained, there are lots of benefits in that. And also, as Rosemary mentioned, it's supported by institutional policies. So actually, there is no contradiction between open access and commercialization. And for those who would like to know more, we have a short course which is called Open Science and Innovation. It's an online course, and it takes about an hour, 2 hours to complete. And it basically covers how open science and innovation and commercialization can help each other and go hand in hand. And also for those who would like to know more, we will have a specific webinar about open science and research results exploitation on November 28. Then there were questions how to convince communities researchers to engage them in open access programs and activities, and how to convince researchers and get them involved in open access movement. And what I would like to share are results of a project that we did with Sheikh Anta Diop University of Dakar. And what we try to achieve is not librarians talking to researchers about open access, but researchers talking to other researchers about open access. And I think that's actually the best strategy. If you identify champions among researchers or among students and let them do the talking, because they're real peers to researchers, and sometimes other researchers would rather listen to other researchers and librarians. And we're really happy that we had a former vice chancellor who was a champion in providing open access to these dissertations. And we also had these 3 distinguished researchers. Some of them were from library school, but one of them was director of research and coordinator of research laboratory on economic and social transformations. So they were all distinguished researchers. And their talks about open access were the most efficient, I would say. Then there were also questions how to convince authors to publish under free license, and the question about copyright and licensing. And I think here, if a journal uses an open content license, then I'm not sure you even need to convince an author, because that's journal policy. And majority of journals registered in the Directive of Open Access journals use the most open version of Creative Commons licenses, Creative Commons attribution. So I guess you just tell researchers that they should follow journal policies and use the licenses that journals suggest. But of course, copyright and licensing is a question when you upload copies of published articles into open access repositories. And I would like to show you a checklist that we will release very soon. And I don't know, maybe some of you know this campaign, Think, Check, Submit, how authors could check whether journals are really reputable. So we came up with this wording, you walk your rights, no, think, retain. And we want to encourage authors to try to retain the rights to deposit a copy of paper in an open access repository. And they can do it by attaching Spark author addendum to their copyright transfer agreement, or they could try to negotiate with publishers modification to a copyright transfer agreement that would allow them to provide open access to a copy of published article. Or they could also ask a publisher to use one of Creative Commons licensing. And I think a good news is that with policy movements in Coalition S and Plan S, more and more publishers would be offering open licensing and allowing depositing the published papers in open access repositories under open licensing. So I'm optimistic that there will be some positive developments in this area. Then we had questions about how to make faculty members appreciate the fact that open access is vital for academic growth, actually important. What is the individual benefit of depositing articles in an open access instead of making money out of paid downloads? And I think this last one is also important, because authors are not making money out of paid downloads, publishers are, and publishers never share any of that with the authors. So I don't think when authors provide open access, they're losing any money because they're not paid for other people access to their journal articles. Of course, if we talk about books, books have royalties, and I don't even know universities that actually mandate open access to books, because everyone understands that if authors want to sell books, that's okay. That's it's not a problem, and there is no requirement to provide open access to a book and stop selling it. But for journal articles, there are no financial revenues for authors. And Rosemary already addressed the benefits, individual benefits of open access. I usually show examples. For example, one of the recent Nobel Prize laureates in economics deposits his articles in Harvard open access repository. And when Michael Kramer was announced as a new co-winner of the Nobel Prize, the repository manager tweeted a link to all publications in Harvard open access repository. So I always say that if Nobel Prize laureates do that, why don't others do that as well? And then, of course, there is this issue that it's not enough to be published, even if your work is published in a very best journal. There are so many other articles published daily, and there are so many people who wouldn't have access to that journal, that it's not enough just to publish and sit and wait for citations, feedback, etc. Also should really make efforts to get more citations and more visibility. And all the studies that have been conducted confirm that availability of papers in an open access journal or in an open access repository bring more citations. And also, if data is deposited together with publications, and I mean research data that was used to come up with the results described in a publication, then those articles are cited 25% more than articles that don't make papers, that don't make data available. So it's another incentive. Data availability brings even more citations. And then we have a set of questions about repositories. And I think Rosemary already started with the first one. And you can also see some other questions here on the screen. So what I can also add to the first one, how do I advocate open access to my researchers when I do not provide them with an open access repository? Actually, now you don't even need to have an institutional repository, because you can use other platforms. For example, there is a shared repository called Zenodo, which is managed by Center for High Energy Physics, CERN, which is a UN organization based in Geneva. And what departments, universities could do, they could set up a community on Zenodo, for example, like this Department of Information and Communication Technologies of University of Barcelona. And they can have their space on this shared repository. They don't need to bother about managing an infrastructure. They just manage their departmental or university collection, uploading theses, journal articles, data sets to this repository. So there are free tools you can use if you don't want to set up your own institutional repository. And then coming back to other questions, how to get faculty self-archive, what are motivation, incentives, how to influence faculty on institutional repository, how to increase deposit rates. And here the answer is to try to link deposit in the repository with research assessment, evaluation, promotion, or awards. For example, there is Ruđer Bošković Institute in Croatia, and they have an annual research award. And the rule is that if you want to apply for this award, you have to deposit your publications in an open access repository. So there is a similar requirement at UCAD, which I already mentioned. So in French-speaking Africa, there is a regional body that manages evaluation and promotion of researchers called CAMES. And rector of UCAD said that all researchers who would like to apply for promotion should deposit their research articles and theses and dissertations in an open access repository. And that was also an advice given by Dr. Ilo, who was going to join us today, but unfortunately was asked by her vice chancellor to be at another meeting now. And what they did at Covenant University in Nigeria, they made it mandatory to all faculty to deposit scholarly and other intellectual output in the repository. And faculty applying for promotion must first deposit copies of their scholarly works in the repository. And scholarly works that are not deposited in the repository are not considered for promotion exercises. And that what really worked well for them. And then, of course, also what Rosemary mentioned, that it's not enough to have a policy, you also need to have awareness raising, advocacy and training programs. And you need to have library staff that are there to support those researchers who can't self-archive. Then we have a couple of complicated questions. Pavla asked that you often hear from researchers that what you find in repositories are usually not publishers' PDFs, but either final peer-reviewed author manuscript, a version approved for publication with the same content as published journal article, but slightly different layout. Or sometimes you even have preprints which are not peer-reviewed yet. And it creates a problem for other researchers who would like to cite these papers. And I would say when we talk about author manuscripts, about peer-reviewed versions approved for publication, I think they could be cited as journal articles because the content is exactly the same. So there is no problem with that. But of course, if researchers are citing preprints, they should indicate that that's a version that hasn't been peer-reviewed yet and it might look different after peer review results. And then there was a question about latest policies on management of repository. And I wanted to show an example of one of Serbian repositories, and I think all repositories in Serbia already have this kind of policies displayed on the repository websites. And I think it's really a good example of describing shortly submission policy, content types, file formats, access, open availability of metadata, preservation policy, legal framework, and privacy. So I'll share slides, and for those who are interested, you can have a deeper look. And I guess that's all with the block about convincing researchers. And now we have a block about convincing university management. And do you want to add anything about that, Rosemary? How did you convince your vice chancellor to come up with a policy?
I think I'll give the University of Nairobi scenario, how we convinced the top management to embrace open access initiatives. And I think the best way is ensuring the librarian has really to take control when it comes to convincing top level management. What we did first was just to sensitize ourselves on what open access initiatives are, so that we are conversant with open access initiatives. And when we go to convince the top level management, we are able to make it. So the first thing, I think first of all, we just need to, if you have never really convinced your top level manager or even discussed open access initiatives with your top level management, the best thing is, first of all, maybe just to come up with some open access workshops for senior management. And for the university top level managers to attend those the workshops, you really have to convince them. What we did is that we came up with a repository, a database, and we presented it to the management. We requested for time, just for an opportunity to present them to them the database, so that they can see they can be able to understand the benefits. And we were given that opportunity, and we went with the database. We opened the database, and we discussed the database. We discussed the benefit of the initiative, the open access initiative, and the repository as a whole, what it can do for the university. And the thing that really sold us is the ranking, because the university, all the
Looks like I lost Rosemary's sound. You also can't hear Rosemary, right? Or is it just me? Okay, let's then give Rosemary a minute to come back. Maybe it's a connection issue.
Hello?
Yeah. Now you're back. So I think we lost you for a couple of minutes.
Yeah, yes, yeah. Now it's okay.
Yeah. So I think your sound broke when you were talking about request time with your
Okay.
management to present.
Yeah, yeah. So we presented the product, that is the database, the repository database, and one of the things that made us sell the product was the webometrics ranking, the visibility issues. So we really need to ensure that you give those benefits, you explain the benefits, you discuss the benefits to the top level management. And from that meeting, they accepted to come for the workshop. And one thing I was just mentioning was that this workshop, especially for the top level management, you can talk to other people outside your institution, the people that are also very conversant with open access initiatives. They come also so that they can be the facilitators. And that is what we did. And from that workshop, I think the management was already convinced that open access repository and journal publishing was important to the university. So sensitization is very, very important on the benefits. And then we came up with we also guided them because the library, I think, really needs to take the forefront on the policy issues. Because without a policy, again, there's no way you can implement the open access initiative. So we also requested for we need to ensure that a committee is set up to work on the develop on any open access policy. And from there, I think the policy guides. So with the policy in place and with the repository in place, and because it touches on open access journals, it touches on the benefits of publishing open access journals and the repository. It touches on visibility of the research, and with that, the top level management, I think, got very much involved. So in a way, we influence the policy and decision makers on open access initiatives and implementation of policies, and also advocated for signing of these open access declarations, because the more they sign, the more they get involved in open access initiatives. So for us, we have already we signed the Berlin Declaration, and all the other open access declarations, we have already signed them. So it is the responsibility of the librarian to make sure to be at the forefront, find out what is happening, the current issues that are happening in open access world, so that you also advise the top level managers. So sensitization is very important. Influencing decision making through implementation of the policy is also very important, and for senior staff, and not only for senior staff, we also now cascaded to the faculty staff, and then advocating for declaration, signing for declaration. So that is how we started. We did convince our top level managers, and now they're even more convinced than the library that open access initiative is very important for the institution. I think that's what I can say about the convincing involves the top level managers. When you go down one, you will not get support, because when it comes to upward level managers, there is support, financial support, there is moral support, there is all the support. If you have not convinced the top, then you may not really succeed in developing or embracing open access initiatives.
Thanks a lot. So moving on, we have a couple more questions to cover. So just to add what Rosemary said, I sometimes show this graph. Microsoft Academic now has university profiles, and if I have a meeting with decision-making person, then I show institutional profile in Microsoft Academic, and quite often you see that there is a decline in number of publications and there is a decline in number of citations. And of course, there are many more papers in these universities and just over 3,000 that Microsoft Academic knows about. And that's another reason to have a repository, because then you can really have a complete online profile for your institution. Our next block covers questions related to awareness raising and training. And I think we already touched upon that briefly. What I can add on this last question, how do I make faculty members see the need to attend workshop seminars organized by the library? So maybe try not to have these events as library events, but co-organize them with research department or with your dean or even with your vice chancellor. Make it a university-wide event. And then, of course, this question of many people registering and not so many people actually attending is a challenge, I think, for everyone who runs events. And I don't know if there is a good recipe to address this issue. So I can only show some recommendations that Australian librarians collected, and they basically used this marketing theory to try to market their library trainings and library events. And they suggest to use words with strong associations, for example, university rankings, like Rosemary mentioned, positive words, have endorsement, maybe from vice chancellor or distinguished researcher, create a feeling that everyone already knows about this and you are the only one who is still lagging behind. Use some catchphrases, mention people just like you, show statistics, like Rosemary said, when you look at number of views, number of downloads in repository, they are usually very high. So maybe that's what might be appealing to researchers. Sometimes universities offer free lunches and attached to this kind of events, but I don't know, maybe it would be an incentive for freshmen, probably not for researchers. And then also some universities consider this kind of events for faculty as part of their continuous professional training, and they could get extra points for attending these events. And same for students. Students could get extra credits for attending these trainings. And if it's possible to do this in your institution, to add this kind of sticks and carrots, I think it would work better. I don't know if you have something to add, Rosemary.
Maybe other strategies, maybe you can, what you mentioned about students, I think we do that a lot, whereby we involve the students to do the advocacy and all that. And then also just identifying passionate staff that can be able to be in the committee for outreach, to be able to reach the other researchers. So that is another way you can do it, and ensure that also use young researchers, because these are the future researchers, especially the postgraduate students. It's good to use use them, so that in future also they can be able to embrace the open access initiative. And then just entrenching the open access initiative in your strategic plan and performance contracting. That's something that we do in departmental level, so that you don't forget that it exists, and you don't forget that you have to budget for it. So when you entrench that in the strategic plan, you'll be able to budget for the activities, and be able to do the activities, and also be able to reach so that you can be able to reach the researchers. So that is just something that maybe I could have add on that.
Thanks a lot. Then we're almost at the end. Sorry that we went a bit over time, but like I said, we had 43 questions for 1 hour. So we had questions about open access books, textbooks, and how free is open access. And it was rightly mentioned in a question today that, of course, when you say free, you mean that you don't need to pay for access and content, but you still have to have access to internet. You should probably have a smartphone if you use a phone, or you need to have you need to be online with your laptop, and there are costs attached to that. But unfortunately, that's life, and I don't think that's a barrier that we can remove, other than advocating for cheap and affordable access to internet. That's something we have to live with. There was a question about whether textbooks that are available to download for free could also be included in library catalogs. And I guess here it's meant full text included. And I would say, unfortunately, not, because you can only include full text of content where you have permission to do so. And one way to see those permissions is to check whether this content is under Creative Commons licenses. And if there are Creative Commons licenses, then yes, you can include those textbooks in your library catalogs. But if this content is copyright protected, if it says all rights reserved, even if you can download it for free, unfortunately, you can't disseminate it via your library catalog. And if nothing is said about copyright conditions, then again, unfortunately, you can't do this because there is no clear permission. And then there was a question about open access to books. Positive message around open access books, and I don't know, in our discussions we didn't really hear any criticism towards open access books, other than sometimes when authors would like to publish open access books, they ask to pay book processing charges, and those book processing charges are usually very high and unaffordable to authors from our countries. But that's more about business model, so it's not really about content for open access books. So I don't know if you want to add anything about that, Rosemary, about open access books.
The benefits?
Yeah.
Yeah, it's I think they can be done. Those that are free, they can be downloaded and be included in the catalog. I think that's okay. And we have to be sure that that we are not infringing copyright issues. So those that are not copyrighted, only those that are not copyrighted, and they are in open access books. Like we have the open directory of open access books. I think it's growing, and that is something that is a database maybe that we can include in our catalog. The books that are in that open director of open access books, we can be able to include in our catalog. And as we spread the word about open access initiatives, also we need to spread the word about open access books so that people, researchers who want to publish chapters in these books can be able to publish. We should not just concentrate on the articles, the journals, and all that. Open access book is also growing, and it's something that we need to embrace.
Thanks.
And then maybe Iryna, there was something that maybe somebody asked about how does the institutional repository increase? I don't know if it is coming soon. How does the institutional repository increase on the university ranking? And I just wanted to mention that when it comes to the metric ranking, the original aim of the ranking to promote academic presence, support open access initiatives, and increase transfer of scientific knowledge generated within the university. And when it comes to webometric measures, there are areas that they measure, and that is the presence, that is the size, number of pages, and all that. And I believe, maybe we all know that about that. The total number of web pages hosted in the domain, and including all formats and all that, and the repository can really assist in that, because if we are uploading and managing our repository, we have all the rich files, because open access advocates for rich files, not just bibliographic details or metadata. It's about rich files. So with that, if we develop our own repositories, we are able to improve on our webometric performance. It also webometric performance ranking also one of the another indicator is the visibility. That is the impact, number of external networks, and counting all these external links that the university receives and all that. And if you have a good repository, a quality repository, definitely you'll be able to get external links from other institutions or other universities. So in a way, we can say that really the repository can contribute a lot. We can also look at the increase in the transparency. That's another indicator: transparency and openness. This means number of citations of top scholars and all that. Excellence also is one of the indicators. Number of papers among the top 10, top 10 most cited in disciplines. So with this, when we have the repository in place, in fact, all the 4 indicators, we improve on our ranking because of this repository. We make sure that the repository will ensure that our articles, our journals, our research is visible and is enhanced citation, and we are able to showcase the research that we have. So in a nutshell, the repository and generally embracing open access initiatives can really help us improve in our ranking, because it's all about scholarly output. Yeah, that is just one of the questions maybe I just looked at, and I needed to share about it, because for us it has really done it. We used to be very far, and because of this embracing of adoption of OA initiatives, we are able to be really improved in our ranking. So that is one thing that maybe I just wanted to mention. And also about the lobbying, I think there are other tools that you mentioned, and some of the tools that maybe can be mentioned also. We can embrace as a social media, posters, handouts, even in music, emphasis on net benefits, success stories. Those are tools that we can use, uploading success stories on our website, using our own website to lobby and to advocate for open access initiatives. And also the departmental publications. especially departments like the library department should be having its own departmental publication, and ensure that at least every publication you have a topic or a topic on the OA Open Access Initiative. So those tools and strategies, and the ones that I mentioned also, ensuring that the students and the young researchers are at the forefront, collaborate with other experts, open access experts, so that we understand more about the open access initiatives and be able to be good advocates, to be good outreach people, so champions out there. So these are the things that we need to do when it comes to promotion and encouraging the open access initiatives in our institutions.
Thanks a lot. Coming up to the end, so we had a question about engaging students, and I think Rosemary already covered that it's really important, and I can only add that it would be good if open science training for students could be mandatory, and definitely for PhD students, but preferably as early as possible. And we have prepared a roadmap for implementing open science training practices in research institutions with some recommendations like embedding training models in regular and standardized based training. Try to have hands-on and interactive trainings, not lectures. Support open science skills acquisition, and also recognize and reward open science skills. And of course, there are not so many universities yet that recognize and reward open science skills, but I think more and more starting doing that. So we might expect some more positive developments in the future. There was also a question about open access from a public library perspective, and I can add to that a presentation of this new tool, which is called Get the Research. And it's a tool which is powered by artificial intelligence. And it was built to help citizens to find and understand peer-reviewed research papers. So what I was trying to search for, I searched for chocolate, and this is what I found. So it's a Wikipedia article, and then some articles that address issues with eating chocolate if there are issues. And here you can select all articles or open access only articles. So that's a screenshot when all articles are shown. And of course, there are more than just the two. And if you select open access articles only, it lets you browse open access articles. And I think now they cover biomedical research, but they will be adding some other types of research as well. So that might be an interesting tool to show in public libraries if visitors read in English. And then these are our final questions, and they're really big ones. So I think we've already covered a bit how to build an open access institutional repository, and I hope our tons that we'll have a training in a couple of weeks in Abidjan on how to actually do it. I think we talked about involving policymakers. Open access in Africa is really a big topic, so I don't know if there is an interest. Perhaps we could allocate a webinar to share successes, but really there is a lot going on in almost every country. And then there was a very good question about link between open access and social justice. And to me, open access is actually social justice. And I like these pictures and quotes from distinguished early career researchers who say, for example, my research behind the paywall is of no use, or access to information is a human right, but it's often treated as a privilege, and this has to change. And we all have to work to make it happen. And the last question about not so many research publications that might be in some universities or some research institutes. And I think that's a bigger problem, why there are not so many publications from African researchers, and it's a bigger problem than we as librarians could solve. But I think there is always an opportunity to focus on theses and dissertations, because in every university you would have them, and you don't necessarily need to start with journal articles. And also Rosemary mentioned that there are departmental publications you can start with. So I think there is always an opportunity to find valuable local content that is not available yet and should be made available and shared with other researchers. And I would like to end with a link to LIBSENSE page. And LIBSENSE is a community of librarians and ICT people working in regional and national research and educational networks. And we have a mailing list. We have face-to-face meetings from time to time. And if you're not involved in LIBSENSE yet, and it's an African initiative, so if you're from Africa and if you want to be involved, and if you're not involved yet, please drop me an email and I'll add you to our discussion list. And thanks a lot. Sorry that we went over time, but like I said, with 43 questions, it was almost like a marathon. Thanks, Emilia and Rosemary, for being here and for sharing your experience. And thanks once again to everyone who submitted your questions. So I think we'll continue with this kind of calls. Maybe we'll try to have them 3 or 4 times a year. So we're not sure about next topic yet. Let us know if you have some suggestions. And thanks a lot, and have a good rest of the day. And thanks a lot to AfLIA and WACREN and LIBSENSE for co-organizing this with us. And yes, I will share a recording and slides.